Sustain.
Now, just as laboratories can be accredited, Ms. Kestler, is it also true that the level of performance of individuals can be evaluated by certification?
Overruled.
Could you repeat that?
Just as laboratories can be accredited, can't individuals have their own performance level evaluated through a certification program?
They can be certified. I'm not sure I would call it performance level. I would
Right.
say that they can be certified
Well,
in some areas, not all areas, by the way.
can criminalists be certified?
There is a general knowledge exam for criminalists.
And that general knowledge exam was offered for many years by the California Association of Criminalists. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say many years. It's been offered in recent years.
Well, approximately how many years has it been offered?
I want to say it's just the last 5 or 6 years. It's a fairly recent program.
All right. And one of your responsibilities, I think you said the other day, as the first assistant director of the laboratory and now the director of the laboratory, is to make overall evaluations of the employees who work for you. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I said that the other day, but one of the things I do is I look at evaluation of the employees that work for me. I don't personally write all of them, but I review each one.
And both Dennis Fung and Andrew Mazzola work for you.
Ultimately, yes.
And as the person in charge of these two individuals, are you aware that neither Mr. Fung nor Ms. Mazzola have been certified by the California Association of Criminalists in the discipline of criminalists?
Sustain.
Now, with other witnesses, many months ago in this case, Ms. Kestler, there was discussion about the field unit crime scene manual. By the way, have you followed any of the testimony in this case, Ms. Kestler?
Bits and pieces when I have time.
Okay. And would you agree that one purpose of having a standardized manual of policies and procedures would be to make this particular aspect of criminalistics, namely crime scene investigation, a standardized science instead of a group of freelancers sort of doing what they wish to do at a particular crime scene?
Overruled.
I think one of the greatest needs for policies and procedures is to standardize as guidelines. Obviously, situations arise where you can't always follow policy. The policies and the procedures, and make sure that the procedures are in writing so that people can't question that they didn't know how to do something.
And is it ultimately your decision as the now director of the criminalistics laboratory to implement a formal manual of field unit crime scene procedures and policies? Would that be one of your responsibilities?
Overruled.
Once the policy manual is gone up through the chain and approved, it's being revised right now. My final blessing, along with the assistant directors, will be the final say, and it'll be implemented. If you will, I won't implement it personally, but yes, it'll be.
But it needs your final blessing.
Basically, yes.
Okay. And this manual, which I believe, Your Honor, has already been marked for identification as Defense Exhibit 1071.
Thank you.
Was initially prepared in 1992. Is that correct?
Sustained. Foundation.
Okay. Is there a manual that was started by members of your laboratory to deal with standardized procedures for crime scene investigation?
Yes, a rough draft was prepared.
And was that rough draft prepared beginning in 1992?
That's when it was prepared, yes. I believe. I'd have to see it, but it was around 1992.
And in the 3 years since 1992, when the rough draft was prepared, have you personally reviewed that manual and passed on it?
I began to review it and discovered many things that I either disagreed with or didn't like and sent it back for revision. However, we didn't have a supervisor in that unit since 1992, so it has, unfortunately, due to other time constraints, had to wait.
When did you personally commence the review of this manual?
Shortly after it was written.
Back in 1992.
That's correct.
And you made suggestions and criticisms at that time.
Yes.
And so are you saying, Ms. Kestler, that since 1992, when you made those initial criticisms and comments, that no one in the laboratory has made any effort to address those criticisms and make the necessary changes?
No, that's not what I said. I said that due to time constraints, it's never been completed. Lots of people have made some effort at working at it.
And so now, in 1995, more than 3 years later, or 3 years later, this manual still has not been implemented. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And because it has not been implemented, does that mean that there is no formal, compulsory written procedures and protocols for criminalists to follow who go out to crime scenes to collect and preserve evidence?
No, there's handouts that they're given at the time of their training, and as any new procedures come online, those handouts are provided to them.
But would you agree, Ms. Kessler, that the handouts that are occasionally provided to the criminalists are certainly not as extensive and complete as are the subjects covered in this manual?
Sustained.
Now, are some of the items that are contained in the manual, just so I understand this, Ms. Kessler, you're saying that some of the items that are in the manual have also been distributed as handouts to the criminalists?
I can't say for sure that they're in that particular manual that you have, but they have handouts. Ultimately, they will be incorporated into the manual. I can't at this time tell you.
Okay. I mean, it's sort of on an individual basis. Some may not. It would depend on the individual item.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, as of June 12th, 1994, was it an established procedure at the SID unit that all reports generated as a result of field investigation are to be approved by a supervisor?
They're not approved by a supervisor, they're reviewed by a supervisor.
So there
Because
was no requirement of actual approval by a supervisor?
it depends what report. We may be talking apples and oranges here. What report are you referring to?
Well,
Because it may not be a report, it may be a checklist or something.
let me show you. Let me show you in Defendant's Exhibit 1071, Volume 7, Page 1, and ask you whether or not this is one of the handouts that has been given to the criminalists as a procedure that they are expected to follow.
Well, number one, this is not a handout. I can tell you that.
Okay.
Because this is that would be part of the procedure manual.
I think you've answered the question. Next question.
was it required that that as part of the review of the reports, that the supervisor shall inspect all the case notes and photographs of the criminalist to ensure that the notes are accurate and complete?
I'm still not sure. You keep talking about this report that's supposed to be approved, and I don't know what you're referring to, because then you refer to case notes, and the only thing
Right.
they have is case notes and photographs.
Let me clarify that. First of all, are the property reports, the official Los Angeles Police Department property reports that criminalists fill out,
Okay.
are they to be approved by a supervisor?
Yes, that's department policy.
Okay. And prior to the approval of the actual property reports, does the supervisor also look at the note packages of the criminalists to make sure that those notes are correct and complete?
No, those are often done at different times at this point.
All right? Well, even if it's done at a different point, are the notes taken by the criminalists, in this case those crime scene checklists and the crime scene notes and the inventory and all those notes which the jury's already heard about in this case, are those notes at any time reviewed by a supervisor?
They're ultimately reviewed, yes.
Well, are they reviewed by a supervisor prior to the end of a trial?
Well, hopefully, most cases they're reviewed well in advance of the trial.
And the reason they're reviewed, one of the reasons they're reviewed is to make sure that they are complete and accurate. Isn't that correct?
Again, it's a checklist, so some things, if it's not in there, you can't always go back and complete it.
Well,
I mean, it's not something, unless you have a good memory, that you can go back and fill in if you forgot to.
was it the established procedure at the Los Angeles Police Department as of June 12, 1994, that if the...
I'm going to object to counsel reading from this signature.
Or will,
that
It's hearsay.
or will.
that when the notes,
Or will.
was it the established procedure and policy of the Los Angeles Police Department as of June 12, 1994, that once the notes are reviewed by a supervisor, that if there are deficient note packages, they shall be corrected and supplemented by the involved employees and subsequently filed or stored? Was that the policy of your unit?
Yes, if they can be supplemented and changed. In other words, like I said, you can't always remember something, so obviously you can't supplement it at that point.
Now, in this particular case, show you what has already been marked as Exhibit 1091. Can you put this up on the...
Objection to lack of foundation after this witness shown.
Sustain. Once you should establish the foundation with this witness before you put it up.
You're familiar, as the director of the laboratory, with the forms that are used by the criminalists out in the field when they're conducting a crime scene investigation, are you not?
Yes,
And those forms have different boxes which can be filled out, providing different information about what's collected. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And the forms, for instance, have a place to be filled out by the criminalist for each item to give its sample number, for instance. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so.
And to give an ID photo, checkoff box. Is that correct?
Yes, or Some people can put an ID photo number in later.
But I'm asking you whether that's in the form
Yes,
that you're familiar with.
yes,
And the form also has a place to note whether there's an ID photo taken with scale and ID. Is that correct?
yes, those boxes are there.
And there are other boxes for, to describe the item collected. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And to note who the person is who collected it. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the time an item is collected and what it's been packaged in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And to know what ID markings are put on the item or the packaging. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, let's move on.
All right. May I?
You're on objection, Mr. Mount,
No, this is actually,
Sustain. Foundation. Show her the form and ask her if she knows who it is.
fine. Show you Exhibit 1091, which has already been identified by Dennis Fung as the form filled out in this case for the first 16 items of evidence collected. And ask you, number one, is that the kind of crime scene form that you just described to me?
It's one of the forms, yes.
Okay. And it's one of the forms that are used by your subordinates at the criminalistics laboratory, is that correct?
Yes, this is a very old one, but it's one of the ones that have been used in the past.
Okay. And you did say that it would be the policy and practice to, for a supervisor to evaluate these forms, and to the extent they need to be corrected or supplemented, that is the standard practice. Is that correct?
Yes.
May I, Your Honor? On the far left. Okay, thanks. Now, on this particular form, there are many boxes that are not filled in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And by the way, at any time prior to today, have you ever even in passing looked at the forms filled out by Andrea Mazzola and Dennis Fung in connection with this case?
In passing.
Okay. And as you see, there is no notation as to the ID photo with scale and ID. Those boxes are all empty. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as you read over from left to right, although they have filled in the location of the item and the item collected, there is no indication as to who collected each item. Is that correct?
Not on this form, no.
And it also has a box after time. By the way, do you notice that for some of the items, they don't even record the time that the item was collected?
Yes, I noticed that.
And do you
Probably
also
wouldn't-
notice that for all the items, they omit to say what it was packaged in? Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
And could you now move it over a little bit, please, Howard? And do you also see that the boxes the boxes calling for ID markings? By the way, when they say ID markings, do they mean what markings were used to identify the individual item?
That's a term that's used characteristically, goes way back to when all items, primarily before biological fluid collection and things like that, were marked or attempted to be marked if they weren't going to be fingerprinted or something, with some sort of ID mark of your own. It could be,
So if my name was Peter Neufeld and I was the officer who collected it, I might put a PN on it?
No objection.
Oh, I'm
She wasn't
sorry.
finished.
yes, you might put PN, or might put MK, or I might put a American flag, whatever you felt was unique to you so that you could ID it later once it was out of the package.
And the reason that that procedure has been in existence for so many years, Ms. Kestler, is because it's very important to note very early on who the person is who collected a particular item to begin that chain of custody. Isn't that correct?
It's important to know who collected it. It's now not as relevant to mark each individual item because you can't. essentially, because it's going to be processed either for fingerprints. Obviously, claw squares with blood, you can't mark those, so.
Ms.
But that's the basic philosophy behind it, that you would, no, it's more that you would be able to ID it later.
Well, and it begins the chain of custody, correct?
I guess you could say that. I wouldn't necessarily say it begins the chain of custody.
Well, and isn't one of the reasons then to maintain the integrity of the individual item?
It's a state.
Does that term, maintaining the integrity of an item, have meaning to you as the director of a crime laboratory?
The term has meaning, but I don't see how it relates to marking the evidence as far as the integrity of the item.
Right.
I suppose you could relate it to the integrity of the item, that if you were able to mark something, that you would always know that was in fact the item.
Well, exactly, and so you would know that it didn't get mixed up, for instance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's one possibility.
One possibility.
All right. And you said that obviously when you're getting into biological specimens, you can't actually mark the blood stain itself. Is that right?
That's correct.
But one can certainly mark the envelope that a swatch is placed in, can't one?
Yes. Or if you seal it, that's another way of marking it.
You can put your initials on that envelope.
Yes, in some way, either on a seal or on the envelope or even on the internal bindle, if you will.
All right. But when an item is collected at a crime scene, there's no seal that's placed on the coin envelope at that time. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Most of these items are not marked at the crime scene anyway. They're marked before they're packaged for final booking.
And you would want to mark whatever packaging the item is in. Is that correct? At some point in time.
Yes.
And you would want to be able to identify that package from the moment you first collect it at the crime scene so it doesn't get mixed up or confused with other items. Wouldn't you want to do that?
Well, as far as, now are we talking about the ID mark or the number?
I'm asking whether or not you would want to put certain identifying information on a package so it will not get confused. We'll get into specifics after. I'm just asking the general question first.
So that it doesn't get confused, that's correct.
Okay. Now, now, not yet. Now, in contrast to the manner in which Dennis Fung and Andrew Mazzola filled out their notes, you mentioned that you personally participated in the collection of evidence. Oops, one moment, Your Honor. At the Bronco on August 26th, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And when you participated in that, you too filled out a field note, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And when you filled out, do you have a copy of your field notes
Yes, I
for the
do.
August 26th collection?
Yes.
Could you please take a look at it?
Oh,
Take a look at your own.
see it better over there.
Now, for every item that was collected on August 26th, when you participated in the collection, was the ID photo box filled in?
Yes, it was filled in later because I like to put the number of the ID photo.
But it was filled in.
Yes.
And was every box, could you move that sheet back the other way? That's right. And was every box that asked the question whether there was a photo with scale, was that also filled in when you collected evidence on August 26th?
Yes, it was done at a later time, but after I got the photos back.
And by the way, you did not collect all the items on August 26th. Some items were collected by another criminalist, is that correct?
Yes, I directed someone to collect the larger items.
Okay. And on the same sheet that you filled out on August 26th, Ms. Kestler, in the box that says by whom it was collected, when it was an item that you personally collected, did you put your initials down?
Yes, I did.
And for items where you directed another criminalist to do the collection, were his initials put in the box?
That's correct.
And for each and every item that was collected by you and the other criminalist on August 26th, was the time the item was collected filled in?
Yes, I did this a little differently than I normally do because the items weren't collected in numerical order. Often I put in the time I start and the time I finish.
Ms.
and I
Kessler,
don't do it- If I do it in numerical order.
Ms. Kessler, the question is, isn't the fact that when you collected evidence on August 26th, you filled in every single box on the field note?
Well, there's a couple I didn't because it was approximate, as you see down at the bottom. I wasn't sure, so I'm, where it says approximate, but I guess you could
Well,
say it's
fine.
filled in.
But you filled it in?
Yeah,
Okay.
put something there.
To your knowledge, as the person who is ultimately in charge of evaluating the performance of your employees, at any time sat down with Dennis Fung and Andrea Mazzola to take some remedial action so that they would fill out all the boxes when they prepare a crime scene form?
I personally did not know. We've
Did
had
you,
some.
okay, did you direct, as the director of the laboratory, a subordinate of yours to take some remedial action with them?
There's been some further training or updating on the importance of crime scene notes and importance of filling them in even after the fact so that you can remember, because frankly, I have a terrible memory, so that's why I do it.
Was this a just generalized training program for everyone in the laboratory, or was this a remedial action that was taken in direct response to what Andrea Mazzola and Dennis Fung did or did not do in this case?
It was for everyone.
It had nothing to do with taking remedial action for what Andrea Mazzola and Dennis Fung may have failed to do in this case?
No, because we've been doing a lot of small corrections, if you will, by the supervisors, so we decided to have an updated training, which is an ongoing program we have.
Now, have you, did you review the property reports that were prepared by Dennis Fung in connection with this case?
I can't remember if I reviewed all of his property reports or some of them. We've looked at them off and on for item numbers, and I don't remember if I've seen all of them.
Now, it is required both by your office and also by the Los Angeles Police Department manual that the property reports be filled out accurately and completely. Is that correct?
Accurately and completely, depending on, certain things require different completeness. A lot of it is narrative, and so, what does complete mean? It's an interpretive issue.
Let me show you People's 187, which is actually in evidence. As you take a look at it for a moment. Oh, 187 of the property reports, the official property reports, filled out for items 1 through 14 in this case, which would be items taken at Rockingham. Could you take a look at that?
Yes.
Now, and I believe you said a moment ago that it's required that these reports be filled out accurately and completely. Is that right?
Yes.
Was any remedial action taken with Dennis Fung for his using the incorrect dates repeatedly in this report?
Incorrect dates?
Well,
Sustain.
let me ask you this. Do you see where it says what date these property items were taken into custody?
Oh, I hadn't even noticed that before.
You see where it says that they were taken into custody on June 12th, 1994?
Yes.
That's not correct, is it?
I don't think so. It's June 13th, right?
Okay. And in fact, on page 3, take a look at page 3, would you? There, Dennis Fung wrote that all these items were collected on June 14th, didn't he?
Oh, yes, he did.
And that's wrong too, correct?
That's,
Objection,
Sustained.
It's in evidence.
No, asking the question, that is in evidence. Whether or not she knows what date Dennis Fung collected certain items of evidence, that hasn't been established foundationally with this
Oh, I'm
witness.
sorry. Are you aware that Dennis Fung collected items of evidence at Rockingham on June 13th, 1994?
as I recall, if he did the Rockingham scene on the same day that he did Bundy, then that would be June 13th, if I recall correctly.
So as you look at those official property reports, those dates of June 12th and June 14th are both incorrect. Is that right?
That's correct.
In fact, the property reports, if you look at the front page, don't even say when the items were booked, do they?
That is in a computerized system, so I wouldn't worry that it's on this piece of paper, actually. This is becoming an obsolete form as we speak.
Well, was it an obsolete form when it was filled out in this case?
Yeah, the computer system was in place then, yes. So
There
it
was no
automa-
requirement?
Wait,
I'm sorry.
wait. Let her
I'm
finish
sorry.
her answer.
So that would not be a critical issue as to fill in that date, because that date is in the computer the minute the stuff is entered into evidence, so.
Isn't it required in the Los Angeles Police Department manual that these written property reports be filled out accurately and completely?
I don't recall if it's stated explicitly that way.
Okay, let me just show you.
Appropriate to fill out these forms accurately and completely.
No, I don't.
All right.
Thank you. And in
Thank you, Your
fact,
Honor.
on the same form, Ms. Kestler, on the same form, you're supposed to put down for the item Cs, the quantity of an item Cs. Is that correct?
Yes, if it's possible.
Well, Ms. Kestler, for the bloodstains that were collected, is there any indication on that property report the number of swatches for any of the bloodstains collected at Rockingham?
No, it just says cloth swatch.
Singular, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the quantity boxes were not filled out, were they?
Well, this is a poor copy. I'm assuming no, but a lot of it's obliterated. So,
Ms. Kessler, do you see anywhere on those reports that anybody wrote in the number of swatches collected for any of the bloodstains?
well, on the very first item, there's one cloth swatch.
Okay.
Yeah, it's filled in.
For number one?
Yeah.
That's the item taken from the automobile. Is that right? Let me have the next one.
Yes, that's correct.
But for items 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, and 14, isn't it correct that they don't say how many swatches were collected for any of those items?
4, and 5.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, and 14, all the remaining blood stains.
They're all singular.
Doesn't say anything about the number of swatches, correct?
Well, it doesn't say in the quantity column, it doesn't put anything, but it says cloth swatch, so that indicates singular.
Now I'll simply show you also for People's 188 in evidence, the property reports, which includes the drops on the Bundy walkway. it true that for items 47, 48, 49, 50, and 52, again, under the word quantity, the quantity was never filled in as to the number of swatches collected?
Where'd you start?
47.
That's correct. Again, it says cloth swatch indicating singular.
My question is, has any remedial action been taken with respect to Dennis Fung's failure to note on the property reports the quantity of swatches collected for each of these bloodstains?
The issue is whether, well, he has two options. He can either, so I want to paraphrase something before I answer your question.
I would ask, Your Honor, that you ask the witness to at least respond to the question, which was
Yeah.
any remedial action taken?
Answer the question, please.
I can't answer it yes or no because he doesn't have to count the swatches if
That's
he,
your position.
depending on how he does it. So,
So your position doesn't have to count the swatches?
no, that's not, you're misstating what I'm saying. There are two ways to book bloodstains. You can either count the swatches, or you can say a red stain collected on swatches or on cloth, and then you wouldn't count them. So
Is there any, I'm sorry.
you could say envelope containing, and then it would be one envelope. So, but no, there has
If
been
you
no, there has been no remedial, other than training, is that he clarify exactly what how he's doing it.
Ms. Kestler, if a criminal collects 4 coins and puts them in a coin envelope for collection, is the individual criminal supposed to say coins under the word quantity number 4?
No, he could say,
That wouldn't be expected?
no,
Wait.
you could say envelope containing 4 coins. So, you know, there are other ways of writing this.
So if in the property report it said either envelope containing 4 coins, or it said envelope coins and under quantity 4, both of those approaches would satisfy the requirements of the LAPD manual. Is that correct?
I don't think the manual's explicit, but that would satisfy my expectations, yeah.
In this instance, Ms. Kestler, Dennis Fung did not put down under quantity the number of swatches in the envelope. Is that correct?
Objection.
Overruled. Do you know the answer to that question?
I believe there's additional swatches. No, he didn't put the number down, that's correct.
Nor did Dennis Fung write in the content area coin envelope containing 4 swatches, 5 swatches, or however many swatches there were, did he?
Again, I wouldn't,
Sustain.
I'm going to put these back. Now, as of June 12th, 1994, was it the policy and practice of the Los Angeles Police Department Crime Laboratory that no evidence shall be distributed to laboratory units for analysis unless either the booking criminalist accompanies the evidence at all times or the evidence has been officially booked at the evidence control unit?
Sustain.
Was it the policy and practice of the Los Angeles Police Department as of June 12, 1994, that no evidence shall be distributed to anyone other than the booking criminalist unless the booking, I'm sorry, withdrawn. Was it the policy and practice of the Los Angeles Police Department as of June 12, 1994, that for items of evidence that had not yet been booked, that the booking criminalist accompany the item to be analyzed at all times?
no.
Is that one of the procedures that is currently in the manual that has not been altered?
Objection, irrelevant.
Sustain.
Do you believe it would be an appropriate measure to take to protect the integrity of items that have not yet been officially booked for the criminalist who collected the item or who will book that item to accompany it at all times?
Overruled.
It would be a nice thing to do, but in the absence of being able to do that or doing that, it should be documented, and that's all I would require. Who it was given to, what date, and when.
Was it the policy and practice of the Los Angeles Police Department Criminalist Unit as of June 12, 1994, that in instances where opinions are rendered as a result of any chemical or physical test and/or procedures performed in the field which cannot be reproduced in the laboratory, that a analyzed evidence report be prepared?
It is vague, but I think I can clarify it if you would like me to attempt that.
Please do.
If it's our policy is that we don't write analyzed evidence reports for screening tests, presumptive tests for the most part. You can, and that's one of the things that's even vague within our own policy, which needs to be clarified and will be in this manual. We will determine whether we're going to write them for every time or not at all.
Ms. Kestler, are you aware of the fact that Dennis Fung claims that in the first week of July of 1994, he went out to the Ford Bronco and he did a presumptive test on one of the smears that he observed on the saddle of the driver's door?
Sustained. Sustained. Rephrase the question, please. It's argumentative the way it's formed.
One moment. May we approach for a moment, Your Honor?
The way you phrased, I'm not saying it's an improper subject to inquire into. The way you
Okay.
phrased the question was argumentative.
Sorry. Are you aware that Dennis Fung testified that during the first week in July, he went out to the Ford Bronco and he did a presumptive test on one of the smears that he said he observed on the saddle of the driver's door?
I've been told that was his testimony. I have no personal knowledge of it.
And are you aware of the fact that that during that first week in July when he went out there, that he did not prepare an analyzed evidence report?
I have no personal knowledge of that.
Well, Ms. Kestler, when we met with you on July 13th of 1995, just last month, didn't you say that it would be the practice and procedure of your laboratory to require that a criminalist prepare a report, even for a presumptive test, if the person was not going to be able to collect the evidence and bring it back to the laboratory?
No, that's not what I said.
Wait, that is hearsay. It's not a 1235 issue. The objection sustained. Answer stricken.
Isn't it your policy and procedure as the director of the Los Angeles Police Department Crime Laboratory that whenever an analytic test is done in the field and the item of evidence cannot be collected and brought back to the laboratory, that an analyzed evidence report be prepared?
No, I don't think I said that even in that meeting. I think what I said was that it should be noted somewhere at least. The question of writing the report is what is up in the air at this point.
Well, when you say it should be noted, in other words, it should be noted that the person went out there, that the person conducted the test, and what the results were. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware of the fact that Dennis Fung did not note anywhere that he conducted the test and what the results were?
Overruled. Are you aware of that?
Oh, no, I'm not aware of whether it was recorded or not.
All right, Mr. Neufeld, about 15 minutes.
For a
Break.
break? Okay. One moment, Your Honor. As of June 12th, 1994, was it the policy and procedure of the LA Police Department's Criminalist Laboratory to take whatever measures are necessary to protect the crime scene?
Whatever's in their power. The crime scene is, it would be nice that all criminalists can do what they can do at a crime scene, but the crime scene is already in control of the police officers, and it's not really our crime scene, it's the detective's crime scene.
Well, hasn't a memo been given out to all employees of the Los Angeles Police Department that it is the responsibility of the criminalist?
Sustain.
All right? I'd ask this, what is this next one called?
1318? 1318.
May I have a moment to read this document, Your Honor?
Certainly.
Actually, Your Honor, it's already part of, maybe we should not mark it separately. The manual itself is already marked as 1071.
Then how about if we stop taking pages out of it?
Yes. How about it?
Why don't you just show that briefly to Mr. Darden so he knows what you're referring to, counsel?
All right. Your Honor, it's actually brought to my attention that there may be a reason to do this as a separate exhibit. And I will make a separate copy,
All right.
okay? But just to save time, may I show it to the witness?
Show it to Mr. Darden first.
Sure. Which is a memo from then head of the police department, Darrell Gates.
1974, not signed.
Have you seen that memo, which is directed to all personnel of the Los Angeles Police Department?
Well, it's a notice from 1974, if you give me a moment. It's before I even came to work for the department, and it's not signed by Gates, by the way. So I'm not sure it's official.
All right. Do you have any questions regarding this item?
I do.
I think we need to establish a foundation for it.
Right.
It appears to be a 21-year-old document.
I understand that.
Oh, I don't need to look at it. Well, not at
Miss-
this point.
Ms. Kestler, from time to time, is the Los Angeles Police Department's policies and procedures updated by memos that emanate from the Office of Operations or from the Office of Operations?
Well, I don't believe that's where it emanates from now. Because Office of Operations, for example, has no functional responsibility over me. So I think it's changed.
All right. Well, was there a time when procedures that were to be implemented for all personnel would emanate from the Office of Operations of the Los Angeles Police Department?
Objection to the 1974 memo.
It's irrelevant.
Question.
If there was a time.
Is it the policy of the police department that the Los Angeles Police Department manual contains procedures and policies that have been enacted and implemented many years ago. Isn't that correct?
Yes, some that are no longer in effect.
And in fact, they stay in effect until such time as another memo replaces them. Is that correct? Or determines that they are no longer in effect? Isn't that the policy and procedure of the Los Angeles Police Department?
Sustained. Ms. Kestler, is this item that you have here, 1318, to your knowledge, is that a current document?
It's unclear to me whether it was even, when it's Office of Operations notice.
No, no, Ms. Kestler, listen to my question.
Okay.
To your knowledge, is that a current, in effect, policy?
I'm not aware of it because it
All right,
appears to
that-
be
no, wait.
directed to somebody
Just
else.
yes or no? To your knowledge, is it yes or no?
I don't know.
Next question.
Did you say to this jury a while ago that you reviewed all the contents of this crime scene field guide manual that was prepared for your division of the police department?
Objection, that misstates the testimony.
Sustained.
Did you say that in 1992 you reviewed the contents of the draft version of the SID division's field unit crime scene manual?
No, I said I began to review it, and in beginning to review it, I saw many things I wasn't in agreement with and sent it back. So this is not one of the things I got to.
So you're saying when you reviewed the manual, you never noticed this document from Darrell Gates in it?
I didn't get that far in the manual. There were a lot of things up front that I thought were missing or unclear or not what I thought was our policy, so I sent it back for review.
Well, would you agree that it is the policy and procedure of the Los Angeles Police Department as of June 12, 1994, that to whatever extent possible, efforts should be taken not to trample or obliterate evidence?
Yes, I would agree.
And from what you have learned of this case, from the testimony of other witnesses, in your opinion, if Mr. Goldman's body had been dragged over a glove, hat, and an envelope, and through the soil, and those items were then moved, would that be in conflict with the policy and procedure not to trample or obliterate evidence?
Objection, lack of foundation.
Sustained.
Well, let me ask you a hypothetical.
Objection to hypothetical.
Oh,
Assume for a moment that Mr. Goldman's body had been dragged through the soil and disturbed items of evidence or potential evidence that were lying on the ground, including such items as an envelope, a glove, and a hat. Would that constitute trampling or obliterating evidence?
Objection. Since facts not in evidence in proper
Sustained.
hypothetical.
Assume that Mr. Goldman's body had been dragged over the ground, and in the course of it, an envelope and a glove. Sure.
without the report. All right, thank you, counsel. Let's wind up in a couple of minutes for our break.
By the way, was it the policy and procedure of the Criminalist Laboratory on June 12, 1994, that it would be the appropriate thing for the criminalist to conduct a quick search for perishable evidence before then going back and doing a more thorough search of the scene? Would that be the standard procedure?
You would like to do that. Oftentimes, you can't get into a scene for some reason, but that would be the ideal condition.
And would you agree that it would be dangerous to remove a body over perishable items of evidence, such as a glove, hat, and envelope, before those items are removed from the scene?
Objection, that mistakes the evidence.
Overruled. Overruled.
When you say over, removed over, if they don't touch the items and the body is on a plastic sheet provided by the coroner or something, though you could protect it and you were careful not to touch the items, you could hypothetically carry the body over them. If you mean that they're going to roll the evidence around or something, that would not be an ideal situation. You would prefer not to have that happen.
Okay. And was it also the policy and procedure in 1994 not to contaminate the scene?
Overruled.
Well, again, contaminate, that's a question. It's almost impossible not to walk in and out of a scene and bring possibly something into the scene or take something out of the scene, but you make all efforts not to contaminate the evidence. I'm not sure what you are.
As the director of the laboratory, would it be appropriate, would it be scientifically appropriate to take crime scene evidence from one crime scene and carry it into a second crime scene?
Not,
Overruled. It's not a hypothetical. It's a policy or practices or procedures question.
as long as the item of evidence is already contained within something that was provided by the laboratory, let's say a container of some sort, and as long as it isn't allowed to be, if you don't take it out and shake it in the air or something, I don't see any problem with that.
Oh, I mean, as long as you don't shake it in the air, it's okay to bring an item from one crime scene to the other?
Yeah,
Is
there's
that your
no-
testimony?
Yes, there's no reason not to do that. I'm trying to think of something. If you're referring to the glove, let's say, if you don't take it out and you simply have it in a closed container where it isn't have any contact with anything else, and you look in the container and you don't take the glove out over any other evidence, there's no reason, nothing's going to happen to it. I mean, there's nothing flying around in the air that's going to fall in there.
Well, what about other hair and trace evidence that may be in the area where all these police officers are moving around when the bag is opened?
If that,
Isn't there a possibility that other hair or trace evidence can land on an object if it is brought into the crime scene from another crime scene and it is not in a closed package at all times?
Overruled.
it's a remote possibility. If that was true, you'd have to really be generating some turmoil in the area. Otherwise, you'd have hair and fibers all over everything all the time. We'd never get any crime scene evidence that was of any value.
Exactly, Ms. Kestler, and isn't that one reason why you don't want to bring items from one crime scene to another crime scene to risk that kind of thing happening?
Sustained.
Could we take a break right now? Thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-afternoon recess. Please remember all my admonitions to you. We'll take about
Matheson, they've all testified to much of what we've heard already. And at this point, we'd like to make an objection pursuant to 352 that a lot of what we're hearing this afternoon is cumulative. We've heard it before. It's not in dispute. We've reached a point of diminishing returns, and we'd object to having to hear this all over again, Judge. I mean, unless it's something new, why put the jury through this again? They're bored. They are bored. I'm bored. It's obvious that you're bored and restless by it.
Oh, no, I'm not bored. I've got 3 pages of notes today. I'm not bored at all.
Okay.
I'm tired, but I'm not bored.
Okay. And a second issue, if I may.
Yes.
As I understand it, the defense has one witness for tomorrow, Mr. Aguilar, the fingerprint expert. As the court pointed out this morning, this jury has been sequestered 6 or 7 months. They're here. They have indicated to us that there are other witnesses that they want to call. Let's call them tomorrow.
Gentlemen, let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Ms. Kestler, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, Michele Kestler is on the witness stand undergoing direct examination by Mr. Neufeld. And Mr. Neufeld, you may complete your direct examination.
Thank you. Ms. Kestler, are you familiar with what has already been admitted into evidence as People's Exhibit 163H, the sub K, which would be the gray analyzed evidence envelopes which are used for items that are to be refrigerated? Are you familiar with these?
I'm somewhat familiar, yes.
Well, I mean, when items of evidence are brought over to your laboratory for analysis, they may be serological items, they may be items for urine analysis, whatever. They would frequently be contained in those very envelopes, would they not?
Yes.
That's the standard Los Angeles Police Department issue, is it not?
I just want to make sure this is the most recent one. I believe it is, yes.
Okay. And in fact, these envelopes are used to, again, maintain the integrity or the security of the items that are contained within. Isn't that one of the purposes?
Yes.
And in fact, isn't there special analyzed evidence sealing tape, that is tamper-resistant, that is to be used on these envelopes to seal the contents of them?
Yes, assuming they're not within another container. In other words, if you book this alone, then you use the tape on it, yes.
Indicating one envelope by itself?
Yeah, in other words, if you're booking one vial of blood in this envelope by itself into evidence, this is my final packaging, then the seals go on this envelope.
It's your position, ma'am, that no seal is required on that envelope if the envelope is going to be put in a box with other items?
That's correct, because in that it's closed and then the box is sealed. So it's only the outside container, the most outer container, that is required to be sealed. Most outermost.
May I put this up on the envelope? Can you focus in on the, can you focus in on the two boxes? Can you blow those up a bit? Do you see where it has instructions for the officer requesting the withdrawal of blood?
I can read the large print, I cannot read the little print.
Okay, perhaps I can read it to you.
Yeah, I would object to showing this to this witness. Those instructions are for an officer, and this witness is not an officer.
Overruled. Not at this point. What's the next question?
Do you see where it says on the instructions for this gray envelope, item number 4, when the affidavit is completed, sign below it as a witnessing officer and seal the vial in this envelope using completed sealed evidence labels. Do you see that?
I see that, yes.
Okay. And
Can you read that, Ms. Kestler, from that?
I can see that, I think that's what it says, yes.
right? And that use of sealed evidence labels, in particular using the tamper-resistant analyzed evidence labels, is to be done to maintain the integrity of the vial that is inside the envelope, is it not?
Yes, again, that's assuming you're booking that envelope by itself.
Is there any procedure in writing that you can quote to us which says that that specific instruction on that envelope does not apply to this envelope if the envelope is going into a box with other items?
I don't know a procedure, I just know that that's properties procedure, and that because you have to seal the external container with, in other words, I wouldn't even use this envelope inside another package. I would use a plain brown envelope because you put a gray label on the outside of your box and seal the entire box because all the contents has to be sealed and protected, not the individual items inside. This is for primarily deuces. Arrestees who are arrested for drunk driving cases where all you book is that envelope with one vial of blood, and that's the entire evidence in the case.
Was this same envelope used also to book blood in this case?
I believe it was,
And
but
it would, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure which blood and whose blood and how it was booked in final packaging.
Isn't it the standard procedure that for items that are to be refrigerated, which in this case would be a reference vial of fresh blood as opposed to a dry blood stain, that it would be placed in one of these gray envelopes?
If that was the only piece of refrigerated evidence, if it all fit in one envelope, yes, counsel. If not, you would use a box with a gray tag or a gray envelope taped to the outside.
I'd like you to assume, for the purpose of this hypothetical, that a reference vial of Mr. Simpson's blood was collected on June 13th, 1994, and was placed in a gray envelope, very much identical to the one that is up on the screen.
Okay.
In that situation, would it not be required that the tamper-resistant analyzed evidence seal be placed on the outside of that envelope for security purposes?
Overruled.
If that envelope, again, as I said before, if that envelope was booked by itself, by whoever booked it, then that booking individual would put the seal on the envelope.
To your knowledge of this case, and as the person who managed it ultimately, was any other reference sample of whole blood taken into custody on June 13th, 1994?
Sustained. It's in fact not an evidence of the way you stated the question as well.
Do you have any knowledge at all that, aside from Mr. Simpson's reference sample, of any other samples of fresh blood or whole blood, liquid blood, being taken into custody on June 13th, 1994?
Overruled. Overruled. To your knowledge, are you aware of any other blood sample?
No, not to my knowledge.
And if that blood sample was the only sample placed in the gray envelope, and there was only that one gray envelope on June 13th, wouldn't it be the appropriate procedure and practice of the Los Angeles Police Department to place the tamper-resistant analyzed evidence seal on that envelope?
No one,
Overruled.
It's okay. No one, no officer that I know of or have ever seen, or anyone in my experience, ever puts the seal on until they complete their proper report, because they have to look at the vial. They then put their seal on before giving it over to the property custodians.
You say they have to look at the vial, you mean they have to open it up to make sure there's a vial inside?
They have to physically look at the vial to see what the vial says, so they can transmit that information on to their property report.
And you're saying that, isn't it the practice of the Los Angeles Police Department Criminalistics Laboratory from time to time, break open a sealed evidence seal for one purpose or another to analyze evidence, or to examine evidence?
If it was sealed, yes.
Okay, so there is nothing to prevent a criminalist from opening a sealed envelope once it is sealed for the purposes of looking at what is on the vial and noting it on a property report, is there?
Objection.
Sustained.
In fact, to your knowledge, at some point in time, were sealed tape, tamper-resistant sealed tape, placed on the envelope which had Mr. Simpson's blood in it?
Oh, well, to your knowledge, was that done?
I believe so. I don't recall if it was booked separately or in another container. I don't recall.
As to this witness.
Which photograph are you showing?
Exhibit 183 in evidence, prosecution exhibit.
Which photo, what is it?
It's a photo of the gray envelope which
Proceed.
contained the reference sample in this case.
Proceed. Mr. Harris, can we zoom in on any part of this?
Now,
All right.
you want to do it with this one instead? We have a photo, we can put it up as a photo. This is the same photo, just on the way. Now, Ms. Kestler, what I'm showing you now is a photograph of the actual gray envelope that was used to contain Mr. Simpson's reference sample when the blood was drawn from him on June 13th of 1994. Can you see it?
Yes,
All right.
barely.
And as you can see, at least when this photograph was taken, you can see the remnants of the sealing tape on the upper portion of the envelope. Is that correct?
I presume it's the sealing tape, yes.
Okay. So at some point in time, sealing tape was placed on the envelope. Would
That's
that be a
correct.
fair statement?
That's correct.
All right. Now, however, as you can see on the affidavit portion, on the instructions portion, for the officer requesting withdrawal, even on this envelope, the one actually used in this case, it states that when the affidavit is completed, sign below it as a witnessing officer and seal the vial in the envelope using completed sealed evidence labels. Is that the instruction on that envelope, which is up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware, number one, that there's been no testimony in this case by Detective Van Adder, who was present at that time when the blood was drawn? that-
Sustained. Sustained.
Right. Well, would it be an appropriate police procedure for no sealing tape to be placed on that envelope either by Detective Van Adder or Dennis Fung until several days after the evidence is collected?
Objection in this case to the evidence. Objection is witness testifying to the police procedure.
Sustained.
Would it be an appropriate procedure of the Scientific Investigation Division of Los Angeles Police Department not to put sealing tape on this envelope for several days after it is collected.
It's vague. Rephrase the question.
Okay?
And do you know
Would it
the-
be,
Do you know the time period?
yes.
Rephrase the question.
Would it be an appropriate procedure of the Scientific Investigation Division for neither the police officer who instructed the nurse to collect this blood sample, or for the criminalist who initially received this blood sample, to put any sealing tape on that envelope for the first 48 hours after it has been collected?
I don't know what the time frame has to do with it. It would not be unusual, and I believe it is the practice of the Los Angeles Police Department officers and personnel in the Criminalistics Department not to seal evidence with the evidence tape, and I believe it's in the property manual, but I'm not positive, I'd have to look, to seal the evidence until you book it, because again, there's no reason to, it's in your custody.
What you're saying then is that the instruction that is included in paragraph 4 of the same envelope that was used in this case,
All right, counsel, we've asked this question now in 8 different forms.
by the way, you know Detective Van Atta, do you not?
Yes?
He's a friend of yours?
When you say friend, I know him on the department as, many people on the department are my,
Well, you've known him for many years,
yeah,
and you're on a first-name basis.
yeah.
Okay. And by the way, your husband also works for the Los Angeles Police Department, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Or
And he works in robbery homicide, isn't that correct?
He works in the robbery, homicide division, bank robbery
Right.
section.
And robbery homicide is the same division that Detective Van Atta and Detective Lang are in?
Yes,
And all their offices are on the 3rd floor over at Parker?
yes.
As the person who was ultimately managing this case, as at that time the assistant director of the laboratory, were you aware that Dennis Fung and Andrew Mazzola went out to collect evidence from the Bronco on the 14th of June, 1994?
Or
I'm not clear, when was I aware of it? I was aware of it after they did it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And would it be the standard policy and practice of the Los Angeles Police Department that the criminalists are to collect any and all potentially relevant evidence each time they conduct a search?
They're to make a judgment as to what they feel is relevant, yes, and then collect it.
Fine, but once they make the judgment that it's relevant, they're to collect everything that they conclude is potentially relevant, correct?
Well, everything that's relevant, but not necessarily all of it. If you have a huge pool of blood, you're not going to take all of it.
Right. But if you have a series of small stains, as opposed to a huge pool of blood, then it would be appropriate to take all of it, correct?
No, if you have, not necessarily, no, but if you have a spatter pattern that appears to all be one pattern, you have to make these judgment calls. You're not going to necessarily take all the blood from a pattern that you believe is all from one individual. You're going to take a representative sample. The same with a trail of blood. If it appears to all be from one individual and it goes for miles, you're not going to necessarily pick up every little stain along the
I'm
trail.
not talking about things for miles. I'm talking about stains in a Bronco. Okay, Ms. Kestler? And the question is this.
it is, the way the question was phrased, it
Fine.
wasn't confined to the Bronco. Restate the question.
I'm asking you about the Bronco, and my question is this. Was it the standard practice and procedure at the Los Angeles Police Department Crime Laboratory on June 12, 1994, that as to any particular stain that they collect, I'm not talking about huge pools of blood, I'm talking about a confined stain, that it was the instruction and procedure at your laboratory that they were to collect as much of a stain as possible if it was going to be used for DNA analysis?
Again, it just depends on the size of the stain. You try to collect an adequate amount, and we've described that over the years in different amounts. When DNA first started, we said we'd like a quarter-size sample. We're down now to a nickel-size sample. So, if that's what you're asking.
What's next in line?
1319.
This is it? show you 1319.
All right, with court reporter, please. All right,
Okay.
but we do need a contextual foundation,
Okay.
just so they understand what this is.
Show you what has been marked
1319.
1319, three-page document entitled Collection and Preservation of Body Fluids, and ask you to take a look at it.
Is there a specific section you want me to read?
Yes, but first what I'd like you to know is this a document that was given as a handout to the criminalists, as opposed to something that would be part of the manual?
Yes.
Okay. Now I call your attention to
Page 2, item 14.
page 2, item 14. Thank you, Your Honor.
Still a foundational objection at this time.
Is this a current or contemporary document in your lab?
I'm not sure if this has been modified. I do know that this is a handout, and then there is some narrative training that goes with this.
All right, would you look at item 14 on page
Okay.
2 and tell me if that is a current policy?
That's basically a current policy, again,
All right.
depending
No,
on
no,
size.
Just,
I'm
yes,
sorry,
ma'am.
Your Honor.
All right.
In the handout that was given to the criminalists who are going to be involved in the collection and preservation of body fluid evidence, doesn't it say in number 14, collect as much of the stain as possible, especially if RFLP DNA analysis may be necessary as a future analysis? Is that the instruction that was given to the criminalists in this handout?
That's what the handout says,
Thank
yes.
Mr. Neufeld, perhaps just for the jury's sake, you should yellow highlight that particular portion on page 2 so the jury, when they see it, will know what it was we were looking at. No, just put it,
That's not necessary. We'll do that after.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
because when they get this a week or so from now to look at,
2 or 3 days.
By the way, is it one of the responsibilities of the SID unit to maintain the integrity of those items of evidence for which there will be some some biological analysis? Is that one of the responsibilities of your unit?
I'm not clear. Could you be more specific?
Well, if there are items of evidence which are going to have to be analyzed, let's say for serological analysis, a DNA analysis, would it be a responsibility of the criminalists at SID to maintain the integrity of those items so as not to let them get contaminated or compromised or things like that have happened to them?
If they actually were responsible for handling them, there's many items of biological evidence we never handle.
All right. Now, in this particular case, you went out to, you learned, that Dennis Fung and Andrea Mazzola went out to the Bronco to collect bloodstains on the 14th of June. You learned that sometime after they came back, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Would it be a couple of days later that you learned that?
I don't recall
All right.
when it was.
But it was sometime shortly thereafter?
Probably, yes.
All right. And you went out to that Bronco on August 26th, 1994, is that correct?
That's correct,
And you collected evidence on that date?
yes.
And when you went out there on the 26th and you looked inside the Bronco, didn't you exclaim at that time,
Overruled.
didn't you exclaim words to the effect that, oh my goodness, look at all the blood stain that is on this console, something like that?
I don't believe I exclaimed it. I did say that I said, oh, there's still blood here, yes. I was surprised.
And you learned, did you not, that between June 14th, 1994, and August 26th, that Bronco had been gone into with people who did not have authorization to do so.
Overruled.
You learned that, didn't you?
Eventually, I'm not sure when.
And you learned, did you not, that in fact another member of the Los Angeles Police Department, Detective Muldorfer, conducted an investigation into people who had unauthorized access to that vehicle. Did you learn that too?
Sustain. It's
I
irrelevant.
don't think so.
Jury
Well-
knows about that.
Okay. Well, as the director of this laboratory, did you conduct any investigation into whether the evidence in that Bronco was in any way compromised, the biological evidence was in any way compromised during that 2-month hiatus between June 14th and August 26th when you went into the Bronco?
Overruled.
I'm not sure what you mean by conduct an investigation.
Well, would it be a matter of concern to you, as the person who's head of the laboratory that would conduct any kind of serological analysis on biological samples such as bloodstains, that the Bronco had not been kept in a secure state from June 14th, or from sometime in the middle of June of 1994 until sometime in August 1994? Would that be a concern to you?
Overruled.
It would be a concern if there was a possibility that, other than someone getting in and looking in it or something, if they would have been bleeding in the vehicle or something.
Okay. Did you undertake any investigation as the director of the SID Criminalist Laboratory to see whether or not anyone with biological fluids entered that Bronco during that 2-month period?
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be my place to do the investigation. I did ask if the individual that apparently got in the car bled in the car for some reason, and I was told no.
How do you know that there was only one person who entered that Bronco during that 2-month period?
Sustain.
Do you know how many people entered that Bronco during that 2-month period?
Overruled. Do you know?
No.
What efforts did you undertake as the director of the Criminalist Laboratory responsible for the analysis of biological evidence to see how many people were in that Bronco during that period and what, if anything, they did while they were there?
We've already answered. Sustain.
Now, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the socks in this case, Ms. Kestler. Within a week to 10 days after the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, Dr. Michael Baden and Dr. Barbara Wolf visited your laboratory, did they not?
Yes,
And they came there to observe items that had been collected and were being stored at your laboratory in connection with this case. Is that right?
they were being stored in the property section, yes.
But when they came on that occasion, do you remember what date it was, by the way?
I have my notes.
Why don't you take a look?
Thank you. It's June 24th.
Okay. When they came on June 24th of 1994, you refused to allow those experts to physically examine the items, did you not?
Physically examine them?
Yes.
Could you define physically examine?
Touch with gloves on or look at under a microscope.
No, they could have looked at them under a microscope if they'd asked for a microscope. They could not handle physically touch the items. We would have provided a scope and moved the items around for them.
They were not allowed to handle any of the items even if they used appropriate protection.
Right, because we had not looked for trace evidence at that point. It was very, very early on in the case.
Well, didn't you also at that point have a prohibition as to defense experts being present when your criminalists initially examined the items of evidence in this case?
We have a policy in the laboratory that we don't allow defense experts into the laboratory. That's correct.
Now, on June 29th, approximately 2 weeks after this case began, you participated in a review of the evidence then collected to see which items would be subjected to different types of scientific tests, did you not?
The purpose of that review was not for that reason. We did an inventory, essentially, and at the time, we made some notes as to what we might do with things, but the main purpose of that was not to decide what to do with the items. However, that was a secondary reason.
One moment.
So it was a reason, yes.
I'm sorry, you said it was a reason?
Yeah, it was one of the reasons,
Okay.
but the primary reason was to do an inventory.
And I believe you said earlier that you started examining that evidence sometime around 2:30 in the afternoon, and that the examination continued until about 9 or 9:30 in the evening. Is that right?
Sustain. Examination. Examination versus inventory.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And didn't you, in fact, that you began looking at those items at about 2:30 in the afternoon, and you continued, the three of you, to look at those items until 9 or 9:30 in the evening?
I believe that's I know we started about 2:30 in the afternoon. I can't recall what time.
And the
we
three
started.
people who were doing this were yourself, your now assistant director, is that Mr. Matheson,
Yes, that's correct.
and Colin Yamauchi?
That's correct.
Okay. And one of the items of evidence that you examined, one of the items of evidence that you observed and reviewed on that particular afternoon and evening was item 13, a pair of socks recovered from Mr. Simpson's home.
That's correct.
And after you examined that item of evidence, as well as the other items of evidence, the three of you prepared a report. Is that correct?
That's correct, but we didn't, I wish you wouldn't use the term examine, because we really didn't examine them.
Well,
We did a
You-
cursory look to see
you
what they were.
analyzed them.
No, we decided they were socks and that they were dark blue or black, and I can't even recall. We didn't really analyze them at all.
Didn't you entitle the report that you prepared that evening, Summary of Analyzed Evidence by Analysis Performed?
That's not what I would have entitled it. Is that on the data printout? Because I have the handwritten one that does no title on it at all.
Was the handwritten report eventually put into typed form?
Yes.
remark 1320. And what I will do, Your Honor, since the only copy I have has certain markings on it, I will not publish it to the jury, and I will provide a clean copy.
All right, tomorrow morning.
Right.
There's a foundational objection.
All right. She has the handwritten, you've got a typewritten.
I'm
Just
going
foundation, ask her to compare to see if they're the same document.
to ask you to look at this exhibit. And first of all,
Now you know why I don't have this one. 'Cause I can't read it even with my glasses on.
Ms. Kestler, before you can finish looking at that, didn't you personally provide us with that typed report at a hearing in this case?
Yeah, I brought it
over
to
the
court.
summer?
Yes, I brought it to court.
That typed version?
Yes, that had been prepared by our office.
Okay, and you were the ones who, you presented that to us?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just that this one is sorted differently, and I'm not sure it's the one I brought. It appears to be,
It appears to be the same. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
yes.
And isn't that typed report that your laboratory prepared entitled O.J. Simpson, Summary of Analyzed Evidence by Analysis Performed? Isn't that what it's entitled?
That's what it's entitled, but that's not correct.
So it's your testimony that your own laboratory put the wrong title on the document that you brought to court and introduced at that hearing. Is that
Well,
correct?
It's not entirely wrong, but that was not the main purpose of that document. There's some analysis had been performed, none on the SOX.
And you have an independent recollection of that, is that correct, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
All right. And in this report, comments were written by the three of you about these different items that were looked at during that day of June 29th, 1994. Isn't that correct?
Yes, on some.
All right. Well, was a comment written next to item 13, the socks that were taken from Mr. Simpson's home? I'm not asking you what the comment was. I'm asking you, was there a comment written in?
Yes,
And is the comment that was written in on the type report, or you don't have the type report, let's just deal with the handwritten report then. Is the comment that was written by you three collectively on the handwritten report, dress socks,
Objection, hearsay, lack of foundation.
Oh, well,
is the comment that you wrote on the handwritten report,
That's not an evidence that you wrote this.
sustained.
is the comment that was put on the handwritten report that evening on June 20,
Sustained as to the authorship. Ask the foundational question.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sustained as to the authorship.
Okay.
Ask the foundational question, please.
On that evening, when you were there observing these items of evidence, which of the three of you actually wrote down the notes on the handwritten report that you have in front of you?
most of these are written by Mr. Matheson. Appears, most of it.
All right? And are the comments next to item 13, were those written by Mr. Matheson?
I'm not sure if that's all his writing or not.
So if it's not Mr. Matheson's handwriting, then it's either yours or Colin Yamauchi's, is that correct?
Yes,
But it's one of the three of you who was there observing the items.
yes,
And the comments that were written contemporaneous to the observations of these items. Is that correct?
that's correct.
As to item 13,
Does this accurately reflect your observations,
Yes,
the notation as to item 13?
yes.
okay. And is the comment that was written next to item 13, when the socks were looked at by the three of you, quote, dress socks, blood search, none obvious? Is that what was written?
That's what's written.
Okay.
Do you
And
want,
would you agree,
Sorry, Your Honor, the witness is not finished with the answer.
All right, have you finished your answer?
oh, that's what's written. That's
Okay.
not, though it depends how you read it, what it means though, so.
well, does, one moment. isn't it a fact that each of the items that was looked at on that day was removed from the packaging it was in and laid out on a piece of laboratory paper?
I believe everything was taken out. I don't know whether they were taken completely out and laid out. You know, they were taken out, looked at, and put back. They were not thoroughly examined by turning them over and those sorts of things.
Are you aware that Colin Yamauchi testified that each and every item was taken out and laid on a piece of laboratory paper?
Sustain.
How many years' experience do you have as a criminalist?
Well, do you mean prior to being a lab director or all my years?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm still a criminalist because as
How
a
many years have you been a
laboratory-
criminalist?
Since 1976.
How many years has Mr. Matheson been a criminalist, approximately?
I don't recall when he started, probably about 78.
So between you, you have perhaps 30 years of experience?
Perhaps,
And
yes.
Mr. Yamauchi, how many years has he been a criminalist?
I can't recall the exact year he started. I believe about 3 or 4 years.
So between the three of you, you have almost 35 years' experience.
That's correct.
And based on your experience, would you not know that if there is a blood stain on black socks, one has to look somewhat carefully at those socks because of the color of them?
Yes, I would expect to have to look very, very carefully.
And you knew that based on your experience.
Yes.
And yet you say that when the socks were observed on that night, the comment you put on the report was blood search, none obvious. Is that correct? Is that correct?
That's what we wrote, but now
That's what I'm
can I
asking you. Is
explain
that
what
what
it
you-
means?
Wait.
Your Honor, I would
No.
ask that the rest of the answer be stricken as non-responsive. I simply
No,
asked
no,
whether the comment was made.
wait.
Okay.
All she said was, may I explain the answer? That's all she said. But you interrupted her and talked over it. You're driving the court reporter mad. That's the only thing I would like you to do. That's all she said. Ask another question.
Fine. No further questions of the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Darden?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
When you examined the sock, that was what, on June, what was that date?
June 29th.
Okay. And you didn't examine the sock, you looked at it, is that correct?
Did a cursory look at each piece of evidence to determine what analysis, if any, we were going to perform as well as inventory it.
Now, when a criminalist is doing a detailed search of an item for blood, you use high-intensity light to examine that item, don't you?
That's one of the things, yes.
Okay. Did you use high-intensity light when you looked at the sock that day?
No, the light's about like in here.
Okay. And you weren't doing a detailed search for blood at that time, were you?
No.
Another means by which you would search for blood on a pair of socks, dark-colored socks, would be to use a microscope. Is that right?
That's correct.
Did you use a microscope that afternoon?
No.
And that's because you weren't conducting a detailed search for blood on the sock, were you?
No, we were just trying to determine what we might, and that's what blood search means. There was going to be a blood search done. We were asking for that to be performed. There was no obvious blood under these kind of conditions, office condition.
And is that what the notation means? Blood search non-obvious?
That's correct.
That doesn't mean that there's no blood present on the sock, does it?
Objection, Your Honor, that calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Well, in writing that notation, you weren't trying to suggest that there was no blood on the sock, were you?
Objection is what she was trying to suggest. It speaks for
This is
itself.
cross-examination.
Overruled.
No, we weren't looking for blood at all.
Now, when Mr. Neufeld asked you some questions, there were occasions when you wanted to explain your answers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's because not all of the questions could be answered with a yes or no answer, in your opinion. Is that right?
That's correct.
What did you mean when you used the term blood search?
Oh, blood
Yeah, no
search
question.
would be later on. In other words, one of the things that those socks would be looked for was blood. We felt that we had some knowledge that Mr. Simpson had cut his hand, and those socks were found in his bedroom, and so we were going to search for blood on those socks.
And so you were planning to conduct a detailed search at some future point.
Yes, at some future point.
You mentioned a little while ago that on August 26th, was it, that you went and saw the Bronco?
I believe that's the date. I'm starting to mix up my dates here. Yes, August 26th.
And that was at Keystone Tow?
That's correct.
And that was in a secured facility?
Yes,
Okay. And you went there with other criminalists, is that correct?
yes,
You went there with some defense experts, didn't you?
yes, that's correct.
And the search conducted that day was videotaped?
I believe there was a video camera that a member of the defense team brought, or someone, I think it was the defense.
Okay. And that would be Mr. Regal, who was present on behalf of the defense, is that right?
I think so, yes.
Okay. And there was an SID photographer there?
Two SID photographers.
Did the defense also send a photographer to the Bronco that afternoon?
Well, they had another expert there, and they took pictures, and I don't know who necessarily took the pictures.
Okay. And so you gave the defense access to the Bronco while you conducted this additional search, is that right?
Yes,
They were present.
that's correct.
And when you looked inside the vehicle, you noticed blood, is that right?
That's correct.
You noticed blood on the console?
Or what appeared to be blood, yes.
Okay. Did you notice blood on the steering wheel?
Objection, Your Honor. Sidebar, please.
With the court order.
Mrs. Kestler, you've seen blood before, right?
Yes,
And when you looked in that Bronco, you saw a number of red stains inside, is that correct?
yes.
Did you see a red stain on the door, interior door?
Uh,
It's vague. I assume the car has more than one door.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Got me, Your Honor. Did you see a red stain on the interior driver's side door of the vehicle?
I believe so, yeah. Yes, yes,
Did you see a red stain on the driver's seat?
yes.
Did you see a red stain on the armrest? console?
On the console, yes.
Okay, would that be, and would that console be located to the right of the driver's seat and in between the driver's seat and the passenger seat?
That's correct.
In fact, you saw more than one red stain on that console, is that correct?
It appeared to be, yeah, I think it was more than one. It was difficult to tell if it was continuous. It was a faint smear over a large area, and then it was difficult to tell whether it continued around or if they were separated.
Okay, and was it your understanding that those areas had already been swatched by Dennis Fung?
Objection.
Sustain.
But you could see that blood, is that right? I'm sorry, you could see those red stains, is that right?
That's correct.
And was it your understanding that the blood on the console had already been swatched?
Based on previous,
Objection again, same objection, Your Honor.
Sustain.
And looking at the red stains that you saw on the console, could you tell just by looking at them whether or not they had been swatched?
up close when they were observed, they appeared to have been smeared.
Is that consistent with the stains having been swatched?
Yes.
You told us earlier that you inventoried some items, is that correct?
Yes, on June 29th. Is that? I'm sorry.
By the way, did you ever inquire of anyone at Bertel's toe as to whether or not anyone had bled inside that Bronco?
No. At Vertel's? No.
Okay. You inquired of someone else?
No, I believe I asked the detectives, or I was told that
Objection
some,
as to what she was told.
Sustain.
Okay.
Sustain.
Your lab does not allow defense experts inside the lab?
no, not routinely. There's a policy.
Is that a written policy?
No, it's not in writing.
But that is the lab policy, isn't it?
Well, I take that back. It is in writing for the firearms unit, but not for the rest of the laboratory.
But
Yes.
Okay. But you changed that policy for the defense in this case, didn't you?
Objection, Your Honor, that's assuming facts, not in evidence.
Foundation.
Well, given your policy precluding defense experts from entering the lab, in this particular case, did you allow defense experts into your lab?
Yes, we did at the request of your office and our higher authorities in the department.
And in fact, you've made your employees available to the defense to be interviewed, is that right?
That's correct.
You've been over backwards for the defense, haven't you?
Objection.
Oh,
I believe we've done as much, and in fact more in some areas, than we do in normal cases. And when I say normal cases, I mean on a normal basis.
In fact, haven't you actually opened the lab on a Saturday when it would otherwise be closed so that the defense could come in and examine the items of evidence in this case?
Yes, we did.
You also have a policy that precludes defense experts from being present when testing is ongoing, is that right?
Yes.
But have you allowed defense experts to be present while testing was ongoing?
Yes, in this case, again, we did in some instances.
And is there a reason that you don't allow defense experts to be present during testing?
Well, there's several reasons, but the two primary issues involved here is, one, we have to maintain the integrity and the confidentiality of all other cases. We have to put everything else away, and no other work gets done at the time that that's going on. And the second reason is safety. I cannot guarantee the safety of any other expert in the laboratory, and we are liable.
And so if I understand you correctly, then when defense experts in this case are present inside your lab, no other testing goes on inside the lab?
That's correct.
So other cases that are being tested and analyzed by SID, those procedures have to stop, don't they?
That's correct.
How many cases do you process within the SID lab during any given year?
In a year, probably at least 50,000 plus cases a year.
You can have one moment. Just about done. You indicated earlier that you were concerned that Andrea Mazzola had been listed as OIC on one of the reports in this case.
That's correct.
Okay, and why were you concerned?
I was concerned because I didn't believe that she in fact was the OIC at the crime scene. My understanding was that Dennis Fung was, or the policy would be that Dennis Fung would be the OIC at the crime scene. And I was concerned that she was listed that way because I couldn't understand why that had been done. And that was later explained to me.
Now, Dennis Fung is a criminalist 3, is that right?
That's correct.
Andrea Mazzola was a criminalist 1.
That's correct.
Okay. And what is the policy? That is, when a grade 3 criminalist and a grade 3-1 criminalist goes to a crime scene, who's in charge?
The 3 is always in charge. He's the supervisor, or whether it's a supervising criminalist or a 3 or even a 2, they're always in charge.
And did I understand you to testify that Dennis Fung was not required to write a report when he conducted a presumptive test at the Bronco on July 6th?
Not a formal report, not an analyzed evidence report.
Now, you have a master's degree in criminalistics, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you had to write a thesis to obtain that master's degree?
Yes, I did.
And we've heard a lot about ASCLD. What relationship, if any, do you have personally with ASCLD?
I've been a member of the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors since 1983, and I've been a member of the Board of Directors for the last 3 years, and I'm the chairman of the Ethics Committee.
You're chairman of the Ethics Committee for
That's
ASCLD?
correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Kestler, you said that earlier that that when you did the initial examination of items for hair and trace and the serological testing back in June and early July in 1994, that at that point in time, defense experts were not allowed to be present. Is that correct?
Objection, this scope wrong.
Overruled.
I'm not sure that it was done in early June or July, and you'd have to be more specific what you're referring to and where we did it.
Well, for instance, Dr. Lee was not allowed to be present. Dr. Henry Lee was not allowed to be present during the initial examination of items of evidence by people in your laboratory during the month of June. Isn't that correct?
If it was done in June, that's correct.
Okay. And in fact, isn't it true that the reason there were certain representatives of the defense team present on August 26th is because the court ordered the SID to make to give us access to be present at those testings?
I'm not aware of that. I didn't set up the search of the, are you talking about the Bronco? August 26th?
August 26th, the Bronco.
I'm not aware of how that took place.
Are you aware of the extent to which it required court orders from this court to have?
Sustained. Sustained.
You said that when you looked at stains in the Bronco, they were smeared, and that was consistent with having been swatched. Is that correct?
Some of them were smeared, and within that smear, there was some obvious additional smearing or rubbing, and it could be, yes, it could be consistent with swatching.
Okay, could be consistent with swatching. It could also be consistent with someone rubbing their hand on a stain, could it not?
It could be consistent with something else. I wouldn't say rubbing your hand on it, no.
It could be consistent with someone rubbing something else on
Yeah.
those areas, other than a swatch.
Yes, that's what I just said.
And when you looked at those smears on the console, for instance, on August 26th, you don't know how they got there, do you?
I know that they're consistent with the previous photographs from the original search of the Bronco. They appear to be present in the same,
I asked you if you know how they got there.
oh, no.
And when you looked at those smears on August 26th, you can't say when they got there, can you?
No.
And finally, calling your attention to June 29th, when you, Colin Yamauchi, and Greg Matheson looked at the items of evidence in this case, you said on cross-examination, quote, "We weren't looking for blood," unquote, in reference to the socks. Is that your testimony?
That's correct.
I don't know, Your Honor, I know we marked the typed version. I don't know if we marked the handwritten version.
I don't know if we have either. Do you want to mark that as 1321?
I would.
All right,
In fact, I'm only going to mark
page
one
one.
page, which is going to be the page that refers to item 13.
Fine.
All right?
So I understand that this item is already in evidence.
Do you know the item number? All right, let's mark it 1321.
When I see it,
All right, want to put it on the Elmo?
Is item 13, would that be the, that's the